Welcome to the Libertarian Counterpoint. My name is John Cameron. I'll be your moderator for the show this evening. I'm going to let my guests introduce themselves and give a little background. Introduce themselves first, and then we're going to give a little background about why we're libertarians and how we got there. My name is, again, John Cameron. I work for Pacific Legal Foundation as a development officer, and I'm going to turn it over to Brett for a short introduction.
I'm Brett Owens, co-founder at a software company called Lead Dino. We make marketing products, automation for small businesses, and also chief editor at Contrarian Outlook, where we focus on dividend-producing investments as well.
Okay. And Gerald?
I'm Gerald Clift. I'm an attorney, computer programmer, and liberty activist.
Cool. And then I think it's our viewers might like to know, how we came to be libertarians. Not the dictionary or encyclopedia version that takes about an hour, but the short Cliff Notes version. I read Ayn Rand when I think I was 15. I was hanging out with some other objectivists, and it seemed to me that libertarian philosophy really mirrored nature. That the strongest leader of the herd, the one that could find water and good pasture, was the leader. And if you couldn't do that, you weren't the leader. And animals who fought the hardest and were the strongest survived, and the weak perished. Not that I'm suggesting that people should die off if they're weak, but it seemed to me that the whole libertarian objectivist philosophy really mirrored what I would call the laws of nature. And now it seems to me that those laws of nature have been kind of perverted and distorted and used to impose socialism on the country. So that's one of the ways I got here.
Sure. So last week we talked about our affinity for both of the major parties, and as I got disenchanted with each one, but thinking about things that I liked, I realized I was a fiscal conservative and a social liberal. So basically a classic liberal, a libertarian where...
Classic liberal.
Liberal, just wanted to do my own thing, mostly be left alone and let other people do their own thing. As long as they don't hurt anyone else, they just go on their merry way. And I agree with your observations that as you see this in practice, it tends to be the most effective way for humans to interact. As you said last week, we're mostly pretty nice to each other. We usually work things out when we're left to our own devices.
Mm-hmm. And Brett?
I just was very attracted to the libertarian philosophy of social tolerance and fiscal responsibility, and became very disillusioned with how our federal government was working during my high school and college years under the Bush administration. And then this guy, Ron Paul, came along, congressman from Texas.
Ron Paul.
He just did amazing in the debates. I really felt that he was speaking to me and just seemed to have the right ideas about the role of government and the size and scope that it should take. Mm-hmm. And I felt the need to get more involved and with his campaign, but also just generally with supporting causes of liberty.
Cool. Okay. Well, on that note, viewers, we'll start with our topics. The first one, I think, Gerald, you want to talk about occupational licensing regarding dentists is hurting poor people.
Yeah, so there was actually a really good article in Reason Magazine recently about the harm that the American Dental Association is doing by fighting dental assistants, dental therapists. It's a new type of classification they're creating similar to nurse practitioners.
Or physician's assistant.
Exactly.
Right.
So it's not quite to the level of a dentist, but you're able to serve communities that wouldn't otherwise be served. So right now, a lot of dentists concentrate in the suburbs where, more wealthy people might be, and frankly, more people exist to be customers, which leaves rural areas without adequate dental care. So Alaska, over the last 10 years, actually started allowing these this new class of dental therapists to work with Native Americans, and they found that they were able to provide dental cleanings, fluoride treatment, and other dental care at a reduced cost, and provided to people that otherwise wouldn't be able to make it to a dentist. And sure enough, people got better dental care, and dental problems severely dropped in the area. Mm-hmm. And Interestingly, the Federal Trade Commission is very much in favor of this. They see it as a cost reduction measure and a way to increase access. But as I mentioned earlier, the American Dental Association is like, no, we have all these licensing laws in place. We don't want you hurting the bottom line for our dentists. So, but if the interest is truly in providing affordable, quality dental care to as many people as possible, we need to allow more people to practice without being hindered by these licensing laws.
So, and did you want to comment on this before I threw in my 35 cents?
Yes, I would say it's amazing that you can find great anything except for dentists, doctors, which are regulated and have their supply constricted. If you want a great restaurant, you pull up your phone, you go to Yelp, you find a great restaurant, it's rated highly, you go to it, and there you go. If you're looking for a gardener to help with your house, you can go through the same process. You find somebody highly rated, highly touted, and usually you have a very good experience. We just got a hot water heater, that's what we did. Good luck trying to get a doctor or a dentist that way. You have to go through a referral. You hope that they're taking new patients. You're probably going to wait many months before you can get your first appointment in. It just shows the difference in terms of having a restricted market versus a wide open market where it's left to sort itself out.
Well, let me pose this question. All of these regulations, especially when it comes to the medical field, are put in place with the idea that they're protecting people from the dangers of unlicensed practitioners when your health is at stake. I'm going to throw out this idea that actually it's a monopoly designed to prevent competition. And I propose a little change. You have the AMA. Let's go ahead and start a competing organization called the AHA, the American Healers Association. You can both put out a shingle, and then the way you find out if you want to go to an AMA doctor or an AHA medicine man is by going to Yelp and finding out how satisfied their patients are. And then you can choose to go wherever you want, like you can for the restaurant. What do you think?
Oh, I think if that happens, everyone's going to go to AHA because they're going to have all the Yelp reviews. Because good luck looking up doctor reviews on Yelp. They're few and far between, and they are often not even representative. So if AHA is more open, assuming that they're more open than the AMA is currently, then I think it wouldn't take too long.
So again, and would this play into the idea, the libertarian idea, that people should be accountable for their own actions and allowed to make choices? I mean, you can in any other area. So I again will throw out another idea. I propose that 99.9% of these credentials that limit people from entering any field of business are not designed to actually keep the public safe or free from harm, but are designed to prevent competition. Is that?
I think that's very accurate. There was a good New York Times article about how it actually harms a lot
touting the
of
New York Times. Let me see your business card. Are you selling ad copy?
They just started paying me. I have to say it
all
every
right.
few minutes.
Yeah.
No, they had a good article about how it's devastating to the economy because it prevents upward mobility, and when economic changes occur, you need to change professions. It makes it even harder for lower income people to do that. But piggybacking off your initial point, I totally agree. Whether it's private or even if the government wants to get involved, you can have some sort of seal of approval that says this person, according to us, our organization is good at being a doctor, dentist, whatever, but you're not preventing them from doing that. So if the AHA that you may suggested,
American Healers Association, I like it.
I like it as well.
You can say, aha. See how that works? Yeah.
Or the AMA, if no one's willing to give you their stamp of approval, you can still go out and you can still say, I'm a doctor. They don't say I am, no organization says I am, but I'm a doctor. And if someone's willing to pay that person, they can. But if they want, they can look up the website of AHA, AMA, or some other entity and say, well, they've given them approval. I trust this organization, so I'll give that person my business. And I think that would work very effectively, and you would prevent these monopolies from occurring that really just prevent access to quality services for people that otherwise can afford it or through other circumstances are just unable to get those services as a result of licensing.
I would throw another log on this fire here. There's I don't know if I'm allowed to, I guess Consumer Reports, I think it's a .org. So when I'm getting ready to buy a new product, an automobile, an appliance, a set of headphones, whatever. I have this $20 a year membership that I go on Consumer Reports, and I look at their ratings. And the reason people join Consumer Reports is that they believe that those ratings are objective. And the minute, if that organization decided to sway their reports in some way, then people would look somewhere else. And I think that kind of commercial, market-driven, independent resource that judges things would work to decide whether or not a hospital is a good hospital or a dentist is a good dentist or anything.
Yeah, I would agree. Some combination of the independent reviewer, the Consumer Reports, so you know that they're unbiased, and then you take your Yelp or your Amazon-style reviews where you're getting the feedback. Those can be biased to an extent because are the reviews real, fake, but once you get to a sufficient number, you get more confidence there also. So some combination of the two provide you with a better rating than you have currently.
Well, and even with the Yelp market forces apply, if people follow Yelp guidelines and discover that there's cockroaches in the restaurant, the food's undercooked, it's overpriced, the service is surly, they go, bad restaurant, first time. Second time they do it, they're thinking bad Yelp, and they'll go somewhere else, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So we've solved a third of the world's problems in the last 6 minutes. Good job, guys. Go ahead.
Picking up on your Consumer Reports point, I think it's part of the difference between libertarians and maybe liberals or Democrats. I saw a Consumer Reports study that claimed that rice had an alarming amount of arsenic everywhere in the country, especially Texas, except for Oregon, Washington, California. And of those three, California was the best. So I started buying California rice. But I don't want the government to say you can't buy Texas rice. I just am happy that I, as a consumer, was able to use this organization that I trust to review things and read their study and say, you know what, I'm going to start making my purchases for California rice until those other states get their stuff together.
Okay, and a little arsenic is good for you. It's used medicinally. It's a lot of arsenic that you have a problem.
That's true.
Well, I think we covered that ground a little bit. Now, give Brett a chance here. Pre-crime in Georgia, prosecuting or persecuting alleged intent.
Sure. Well, I believe this was a story where a police officer went out soliciting a prostitute and then just arrested her. Right? I think you saw the story.
Yes.
Gerald. And I guess my argument, if we're going bigger picture with this, I said, well, why don't we just make prostitution legal and regulate it? I was in Singapore a few years ago. Actually took my wife to the 4 Floors of Horrors so we could see that in action. And
wait, let me write that down.
Yeah.
I don't think my wife would go on that trip with me.
We didn't go. Wasn't allowed to go inside, but we checked it out. And obviously Singapore, very safe country, and it works well. It's a good setup. You go, and that's where it happens, and it's regulated, and that's that. I just think cops have better things to do than to chase down prostitutes just trying to make a go of it in the world's oldest profession. Anyway.
Well, and I have to be careful here because as it currently stands, prostitution in this country is not a victimless crime because the people who engage in prostitution, many of them, except for there are some exceptions, some very famous libertarian exceptions, are really kind of at the mercy of their Johns. No relation to this John, by the way. And there used to be an awful lot of pimps out there until the internet allowed people to market their wares. So I think there's less pimps beating prostitutes. But since prostitution's illegal, if someone chose to go into that profession, they would have no legal protection to demand fees for their service or demand payment for fees for their service because they were actually committing a crime. And so they wouldn't have protection. They wouldn't be able to report that they were beaten during the act of a crime because they'd be as guilty, unfortunately, as. And I really think if prostitution was legal, that it would be safer for everybody involved, and it would take policing away from what would then be a victimless crime, which I don't think it is in many cases now. I think there's lots of victims.
No, I agree, and to your point, it's because of the illegality of it. Like you said, they are not able to go to the cops when something goes wrong. I think Nevada is a good example, and a few counties that have done it, of making a working system that is regulated, and women aren't at the mercy of pimps, and they're actually able to make decisions on their own, not forced into that lifestyle. But interestingly enough, in California, we've almost had the perfect example of what you're talking about. If you recall, we had I want to say several months ago, the officers in Oakland with the underage prostitute that was the daughter of a dispatcher. They basically were giving her tips, saying, we're going to raid this area, so don't be a prostitute in that area during the next day. And interestingly, you wonder...
Restraint of trade, again, they're favoring one provider of service. And I'm, again, not making light of, please, I'm talking about something very serious in a playful manner, but go ahead, finish your...
Well, I would say, interestingly, this wasn't just limited to Oakland. Several officers in nearby precincts, San Francisco as well, were involved with this young girl, and I think 4 police chiefs had to resign in the course of a month, 3 or 4, so like a month. They would get a new police chief, they'd find out some conflict, and they'd fire him. And we don't know what the conflict is, because again, they're so protected, these public employees. But what's most interesting to me is we wouldn't even know about this but for the unique circumstances that led to it becoming public. Basically, she felt unsafe somewhere. I think she was traveling in Mexico, and she called one of these officers, and he wouldn't get back to her. And she was so annoyed that she said, I'm going to tell your superior what's going on unless you help me out and get out of that situation. Of course, he didn't respond. She told the superior. He killed himself, and once he killed himself, a bunch of investigation has
The
go on.
superior killed himself?
Excuse me, the officer that she was having sex with when she was a prostitute. He killed himself because his superior had been told about the incident with her. And as a result of an officer killing himself, then it got the attention investigation, hit national news, and now we know that terrible thing the officers were doing there. They weren't stopping prostitutes, they weren't helping these women, they were just getting free services with her under the guise of, hey, we're not going to arrest you because you're having sex with us.
A little protection racket going on.
Yeah, which ironically is what gangs do.
Imagine that. Yeah. Gang in uniform, gang out of uniform. So since we're on the subject of what could be victimless crimes, and I think, Gerald, why don't you talk about tourists being able to buy weed in Vegas, but they can't smoke it anywhere? That seems kind of strange.
Yeah, so this is a good example of just over-regulation. We have, I understand the proponents of the initiative, they were hesitant to allow any sort of public use because they were concerned that would lead to the initiative failing and then there'd be no legal marijuana at all. But now we have this situation where the government has said, you know what, tourists, most people buying in like Las Vegas, for example, are tourists. You can go buy your marijuana, but you can't use it anywhere that's publicly accessible. So you can't use it in your hotel, can't use it on the streets. You just, basically you can buy it, but you can't use it. If you use it, you risk a $600 fine. So
if you're a homeowner, though?
If you're a homeowner, you could, but a lot of people in Vegas don't live there. And
even the people that live in Vegas don't live there, actually. But that's,
they might not. Yeah, they might not own a home as well.
Yeah.
But that's so. There are some instances where people have been able to smoke in public, but it's through loopholes. So basically, it'll be like a private association, like a club. We'll all get together and we'll smoke together, but it can't be accessible to the public. So if you are a tourist in Las Vegas, just by you knowing about it and being able to go there, no longer makes it a private club. So you'd
have to buy a membership.
You have to buy a membership. And again, if you're buying membership, then it's public accessible. So they're in this dance where there's no real way for these tourists to buy the marijuana, which they're doing legally. No one's contesting that, maybe the feds. But then they're unable to actually use this product that they've purchased legally.
Well, they buy it and they can take the selfie of themselves holding a big joint in their hand and send it to their friends, but they just can't smoke it.
Exactly.
Right? That seems pretty darn strange.
How about traveling with it? Are they allowed to get on the? You're not allowed to get on a plane.
Well, so that's what's interesting too. Really, you're not supposed to, but there's conflicting reports of basically it's up to the TSA agent. Most TSA agents don't seem to care, but if you find one that does, I don't want to be risking interstate trafficking laws.
Yeah, interstate transport of a controlled substance.
Yeah, it's not a good one.
And it's still, I think pot's still classified in federal government size in the same classes like heroin and
Schedule
morphine and all the rest of that. Obviously, whoever's checking this stuff out has never done heroin and marijuana because they would notice there's a pretty significant difference. What about other victimless crimes? And this is the one that's always brought up. The obvious one is drug use. Mm-hmm. Is it really victimless if I use drugs and I overdose and I crash my car? You know, victimless?
No, but I mean, you're not allowed to drink while you're driving either, and we're certainly happy to let someone drink at home. And similarly, if you want to, I think this is kind of the distinction. You can maybe make laws about public intoxication, whether it be alcohol or otherwise, but then what you do in your own home, whether it's use heroin or use cocaine, that...
We sound like a bunch of druggies, don't we? But that's we're just talking about the moral dilemma here of protecting society and kind of free individual will. So go ahead.
Let's say it's not about drug use so much as Gary Johnson once put it, a harm reduction. The amount of users in the U.S. is incredible. Portugal, for example, they decriminalized all drugs a little more than a decade ago.
All drugs?
All drugs, yes.
So, and crime probably plummeted to never before seen lows.
Well, not only did it go down, but actually usage went down because they were dealing with major drug usage. And what's interesting now is per capita, more people use cocaine in the United States than marijuana in Portugal. So that's totally flipped on its head. The amount of time and effort we put into stopping drugs has only made them more prolific, more dangerous, and it prevents the consumer from actually knowing what they're getting. Some people might think they're using heroin, and then something worse is actually put in there. There was an incident a few years ago where dozens of people died over the course of a week because I want to say like some sort of tranquilizer was put in some batch of heroin. You don't get that when you buy something at a store. It has a label, says what's in it, and if the manufacturer is doing something wrong, that manufacturer, and you can avoid that manufacturer.
There's the manufacturing lot number right on the package, just as there would be with anything else. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and just generally speaking, it goes to the philosophy argument as well. You should be able to make bad choices, otherwise you don't really have choices.
I always like to see these decisions pushed down as far as possible. So if it was a state-by-state decision or county-by-county decision, I think I'd be more comfortable with it. Certain states, if states wanted to allow everything, if Utah wanted to have nothing, that's kind of Utah's.
I thought you were going to just say if Utah wanted to allow everything. I was wondering if you were talking about a different Utah.
Sure, right. So that but again, the states make their own choices versus having it shoved down your throat at the federal level. I mean, obviously, marijuana being illegal at the federal level is ridiculous, being more on par with alcohol. But in terms of decriminalizing other things, I'd like to see that down at more of a local level.
Well, let's talk about another crime. The crime that's being foisted upon the youth in this country by government monopoly on K through 12 schooling. Brett, you want to? Thomas Jefferson warned, "A poorly educated society will not remain free," and I kind of propose on this. I'm just going to throw this out as throw the ignition switch down on the ground to start the fire. That there is intent to miseducate the youth of this country because then they are more malleable. Do you think it is misfeasance on the part of bad teaching and this government monopoly, or you think it's malfeasance? Is there intent to create an uneducated mass that is easily manipulated by the powers that be, or is it just the unions and the monopoly doing a terrible job as they always do?
I think it's more, I lean more on the misfeasance side. I don't think they're that smart. I lean more on the Harry Brown, don't be too worried about the government having a camera in every room because it's probably broke.
Yeah.
So I think it's more of a historical thing from the 1920s, 1930s or so, where we're talking about industrial America, and you just get all the kids in the room like cattle, and you preach at them. And, right, exactly. So not built for 2017, having to think on your feet, having to think originally.
Like you guys are doing on the show. Well, you're thinking on your seat, but you're thinking
sure,
very well.
right. So in the classroom, not having all of these questions thrown left and right and not having to think critically about things. So I think it's more of just train to habit. But I think the schooling system gets more and more out of date. More and more than every year. It's just such a relic of the past. So I think it's but as you said, the monopoly hurts because it stifles then innovation. You see a few bizarre schools, of course, down in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, trying to try new things, but you probably don't see enough of that because of all the you just don't have a free market in terms of education.
I'm going to throw in, did you want to throw something in there? Or?
Well, I agree. I think it's mostly incompetence, and part of it is we're teaching to the middle, and we don't have enough competition, whereas if we incentivize charter schools more, we might get schools that gear towards actual skills rather than saying, well, you're this age, so you're in 4th grade.
How about a voucher? Would anybody have a problem with a voucher?
Yeah.
Now, I propose this as a thought, that all this regulation is supposedly to protect and provide an education to those who can't afford to educate themselves. But I want to throw this idea out, that the people that are actually hurt the most by this government monopoly are poor people, because rich people can send their kids to private school. They don't need a voucher to counteract that $8,000 or so that it costs to educate a kid in this state especially. They just choose to pay for, there's local, like St. Francis or Jesuit or the Waldorf School or any of the rest of those that turn out. Now, there are some public schools that turn out magnificent students. I'm not saying they're all bad, but the norm is, if you pay for it out of your own pocket and send your kid there, you're going to hold the teachers and the system and everybody there, the other students, accountable to make sure that your kid gets a great education. And unfortunately, poor people in this country don't have that choice. They don't have the wherewithal. They don't have the ability to put aside, what does that work out to, $700 a month for their child's education. Whereas for a doctor who's pulling down $250,000 a year, that's nothing. It's probably less than payment on their Tesla. So I think the people who are hurt worst by this government monopoly on education in this country are actually the people that the liberal, not the classic liberals that we all are, but the current liberal focus says they're actually trying to help. And over again, we see these schools failing, these teachers complacent, sitting in the classroom till they retire rich,
And then it's even a double whammy because now you've got the doctor and he's out of the game. He doesn't care about that school system because he's off. He's got his own thing. He's got his private school, and they're out. So now you're left with maybe an engaged parent, family you would want there, and they're off doing their own thing, and they're fine, but everyone else is left.
You got to keep the good in with the not so good. And on that note, we're going to wrap up the show. Thank you very much for watching Libertarian Counterpoint this evening. You can see us at 8 o'clock on Thursday night on Access. I think it's channel 17 here in Sacramento. You can watch this, I think, at 3 a.m. on Saturday. That's my very favorite time to watch the show with my eyes closed. You can see us on YouTube about 3 weeks after this show is done airing. Thank you once again.